welcome to 2025's America's Credit Union's GAC. I am here today with Edward Vincent. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here, Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, he is the CEO at SRA Watchtower. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself and the company?
Our business was founded a number of years ago as a consultancy, and we were helping banks initially set up risk management programs. Mm-hmm. And after doing that for a number of years, those institutions said, we want some tools to be left behind. So we started building some enterprise risk management tools. And frankly, accidentally started working with a few credit unions along the way. And after picking our heads up out of the sand about a year ago, said all the work which we're doing for banks, community banks, regional banks, is equally as applicable for a credit union who should be looking at risk holistically across the organization, especially, as you well know, right, seeing a lot of cross-pollination now between banks and credit unions anyway. So we really leaned into taking this software platform that we built, configuring it for credit unions, divesting that old consulting business, and really going all in on the software.
Okay, very interesting evolution there. And so I'm glad you found credit unions.
Yes.
We were just talking earlier with one of the other guests. We all fall into credit unions. It's all accidental, honestly, and that's what we need to
be. I feel a little better about that.
Employers of choice is my thing. So your company deals a lot with AI and compliance, and I know there's like some scariness around that, ensuring that the AI does what you expect it to do. Could you talk a little bit about how credit unions can use AI in their compliance efforts and ensure it is compliant?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there right from the start, which is step one is you've got a risk team, you've got a compliance team, start there. Go and have that conversation, right? That's the place where you want to make sure you've got a risk policy in place to govern these initiatives, because it can be far-reaching, right? It can really be expansive operationally, right, inside your four walls, as well as externally. So, right, you start getting into questions of where's the data being stored, who has access to it, right, and making sure you've got the appropriate security and privacy in place. But I think it all begins with making sure you connect with your risk department or your compliance department and make sure that you start out on solid footing, right? It's a lot easier, right? An ounce of prevention, right, is worth, right? So you think about this and say, I'm going to do a little bit of work up front, and then I'm going to get a huge amount of value after the fact.
Pay off later. Yep.
100%, right? Beyond that, right, once you've kind of done that as a first step, I think the use cases are plentiful, right? We have a situation today where we've had a credit union who was implementing our software. One of the things they have to do is they have to write descriptions for all the key risk indicators which they are going to measure, right? So the institution identifies a handful of parameters that they want to measure and track to monitor the risk across the organization. They've decided on those indicators. Now they want to make sure they've got consistent, robust definitions of those indicators so they can show those to regulators, they can show them to their board. That's a lot of work, though, to go through that process of saying, if I've got 50 or 100 risk indicators that I'm going to track, now I want to write a description for each of those, and I want it to be done consistently. That's a great use case of AI. We actually put out a podcast ourselves today with a that happened to be a bank chief risk officer, but it was a similar situation where he was using AI. He gave it the right prompts. You know, there's a few cycles that you go through of saying, right, draft one of these, identify the elements that are important, go back and then teach it to say, all right, well, now I want these three components of my description. And then ultimately, look, there's some finishing touches, there's some tweaks that you put on that before it becomes a finished product. But in that example, Joel got 80% of the way there using AI, right? And that took him a matter of minutes or maybe hours, as opposed to days or weeks or months. And so in that example, he had a situation where he was going to go to his CFO and ask for another headcount in his budget in order to fund doing this work. And instead, he was able to go back to that CFO and say, hold on, I'd like to reserve that budget. I'd like to use it elsewhere, potentially later in the year, but I don't need it now. I don't need that person right now. So he saved money, he got a consistent output, and he got it done a heck of a lot faster as well. So, I mean...
And they don't take sick days.
And they don't take sick days. And so, look, I think you have to understand the the constraints, if you will, right? And make sure, again, you've got the right security in place. But if you understand that this isn't going to get you all of the way there in that example, but it might get you 80%, 90%, that's a pretty massive efficiency gain.
Yeah, I'm looking at it as well. And it's become ridiculously inexpensive too. I mean,
yes, it's democratized beyond belief, right? I think that the key, though, is, again, going back to that security and privacy topic, is
it's a little different for banking.
Yes, right? And so, right, in our personal use cases, it's one thing to, kind of draft a plan for a party. It's another thing to say, look, I'm going to entrust this with information about my institution, right? What is my risk appetite? What are my strategic objectives? What are the controls I have in place inside my organization? So, look, that's pretty simply addressed, though. You put the controls in place where that information sits inside of your four walls. Great, you can realize the benefit of this. So, just some small, thoughtful steps that you take up front will allow you to really protect yourself on your back.
It's interesting because a couple of years ago, people were going around talking AI, but they didn't really talk about the purpose for the AI. It's just they knew they had to have it. So I think that evolution, at least the education part, I don't know, is probably not done, but definitely getting there. And so this also helps like automation, so many efficiencies, credit unions need all that updating, need all the efficiencies. I mean, that's
100%.
just it's just the same as investing in your members, right? It's investing in protecting them, but in this way.
I think that's a great way to think about it. Is that right? This is an investment. There might be some short-term benefits, but ultimately, I mean, and what we see in our world is that it's really about extracting value from your data, right? At the end of the day, right? And every institution, right? Every credit union should be able to compete with folks, frankly, that are larger, bigger, stronger, faster, if they can get their hands around their data, and if they can use, step one is getting that into one place, getting it clean, right? Getting it go through all those data quality machinations. But if you do that, then you put yourself in a position where you really can unlock the power of it. And so, to a certain extent, getting your data clean, getting it into one place, that's table stakes. The real value is then extracting the intelligence from it. So, right, whether that's business intelligence tools, it's AI, learning, but that gets you to the point where, right, we like to use the phrase that you're moving from hindsight, or kind of backward-looking information, to insight, which is slightly more timely and more relevant today, ultimately to foresight, right, which is when you anticipate, right, what's going to happen.
This looks like fraud.
This could become fraud, right? Exactly, right? And so what do we need to do differently to stop that, right, before it happens? So that journey to go from hindsight to insight to foresight, you need technology to accomplish that. So yes, it is a game changer ultimately for the members who are going to get the value from that. But the credit unions are the ones that are going to have to do the work to put the controls in place and then invest in the technology, as you said.
And unfortunately, criminals also have access to AI. they're getting faster. I was talking to somebody the other day about, it used to always be the vendors that got hit with the ransomware attacks or hacking, whatever it was. And now it's actually the credit unions, because it's so much easier and faster and cheaper with AI. And so you got to fight fire with fire, right?
And they get access to, right, all of your members instead of one of your members, right? And so yes, you have to really be on your toes here, right? You've got to kind of get on the front, the balls of your feet, and make sure you've got the right security and controls in place. So right, I go back to the first question which you asked, right? Where do you start, right? You certainly start with security. You start with your risk officer, your information security officer, but right. You just have to take that as again, similar to the table stakes comment I made before. You just need to have those things in place, right? You need an AI policy. You've probably got an information security officer that is thinking about this stuff. Start there, and then you can push into the use cases, because the use cases are plentiful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so this, even though it's all into one place, it is a lot of data coming in together somewhere. How's an exec look at it? How do you help them make it more useful in somebody who's not a AI person,
think the first step is you have to acknowledge that it's not one and done. You're not going to get it right coming out of the gate. And so I think the first thing is to set that expectation right with a leadership team, with an executive team, that we're not going to invest in this and get the answer right away. Right? Frankly, investing and failing is almost as valuable as investing and succeeding. Right? You learn what you can do, what you shouldn't do, right? What the limitations are.
Right.
So I think kind of the first step there is socializing that concept that this is going to be a journey. You're going to have to iterate. You're going to, in the example I mentioned there before about writing those risk descriptions, you're going to ask the AI to write it for you. Then you're going to look at it and say, well, hold on, it gave me these five areas. I only need these 3. So now I'm going to go back and say, ignore these 2 areas. Just include these three elements. Then you're going to get a set of results back and say, all right, well, now I want to be able to drill down deeper into one of those areas. So I think iteration is the key concept there. There's not a quick fix. That being said, right, as you iterate, you're going to get better and better and better each time, right? And so the power of AI, right, is that it does learn and it builds upon itself. And so you will start realizing that the return on investment is going to increase, right? You have to be willing to make that investment up front, but the returns you'll see them accelerate over time.
Yeah, and that's certainly going to be accelerating faster and faster and faster. So I always give my guests final thoughts. What do you want to leave our accrediting audience with today?
I think I would say that harnessing the power of your data is really the only way to survive, right? It used to be, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, you'd say, I've got to lean into my data. That's going to differentiate me in the marketplace. You actually need to lean into your data to survive at this point in time, right? The differentiation then comes from extracting value from that. And so AI is a great way to extract value. But there's other steps along the way, right? Pure kind of business intelligence tools are a great starting point as well, right? Getting your data into a single repository, putting BI tools in place. Those are kind of crawl, walk, run steps.
Right.
You do that, then you can lean into the AI. So I think that the final word I'd say is, it's never too late to get going, but you do have to get going now.
Right.
And so if folks have not leaned in, that's okay. Start by going and have a conversation with your CISO, with your risk officer. Make sure you understand the guideposts, but then lean in and be ready to iterate. Be ready to try and understand that this is going to be a multiple cycle journey, but ultimately the value is absolutely there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Edward.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Bye.